back to Sustainability Spotlight. I'm your host, Lavanya, and today we are tackling some key topics in the world of life cycle assessments and product carbon footprints. Joining me is Jonas Johannisson, Sustainability Program Development Manager at TÜV SÜD, a leading expert in verification and critical review of LCAs and PCFs. Jonas, it is great to have you here.
Thanks. Pleasure being here.
All right. Well, let's head on. I am pretty excited for this talk because verification, as I know, in the LCA and PC community is something that people always have to go through, but still always have this almost an underlying fear or a lot of questions. So let's begin. We have an expert in the house today. So Jonas, LCAs and PCFs, as we see, are rapidly scaling up with digital tools now playing a key role, right? So for companies just starting out on their digital journeys of automating PCF and LCA calculations, what are the key considerations at the beginning of the process to ensure that most of the work is in place by the time, let's say, verification is needed?
Very good question. And I think I had to answer this question quite often for very different companies and very different needs. But I think it all comes down to you have to start small. So I wouldn't worry about verification if I didn't already do my first, 10 LCAs or product carbon footprints. So it's really about first getting into the game and then, let's say, to play in the big league, it's really about then verification. But first, you really have to learn how to do it. And therefore, I would also recommend to really start small, start by using your knowledge, best practices, and really doing LCA by hand, and don't overcomplicate by using software too early. It's completely fine to start with Excel, even if I wouldn't recommend it later on. But really to gather information to see, okay, where are my limitations currently in my company? It's quite good to just get started. And we see that quite often it's overcomplicating to just start by, for example, you talked about scaling up and automation by looking up a software provider to help you out. This, of course, can be very beneficial. But if you don't have the data already available, which is then being used in the software, it doesn't really make sense. Then you, of course, run into the same issues, but it's just more expensive than solving them before you would start with scaling up later on. So, what we see or what I see in this scaling environment, of course, is exactly that you should first, start small, and then also think about, what do I want to achieve? Do I want to achieve my LCA or product carbon footprint just gate to gate? So just my, let's say, area of responsibility. Do I need to reach out to customers? Which methodology do I want to use? Which impact categories are interesting for me? And just start doing and figuring things out, I think is quite important here to really also think about, where are my hotspots in this analysis, and then focus on these processes to really dig down on, then also thinking about, what databases do I use? Where do I get the data from? And all of that needs to be settled, I think, and then we can talk about scaling up in automation. And well, by then, I think the biggest hurdle for nearly any company is data. It's just, where do I get this data from? And I don't think there's a perfect solution to solve all of that. But yeah, digital tools can help you a little bit with that by using secondary data, by providing secondary data. But of course, I think that primary data is still key, and you can't get that from any software. You have to figure that out yourself, how to get this data inside of your company, and at best also from your suppliers.
Right. we will come back to primary data again, Jonas, as we go forward. But I have a question following this. So let us say that you have gone through the whole cycle of doing your LCAs, a few bit of them on Excel. So you have gone through that evolution process and are now at the stage that you are automating and getting softwares onboarded to do your, entire product portfolio LCAs altogether. So when I'm looking to get a verification done on this process, right, on automating at a larger scale, what is it that I can expect uh, for a verification, for a verifier or a certifier like you to come and see whether things are in place or not?
Mhm. Um, I think we highlighted that topic in a white paper publication of a PCF initiative. It's called Stadium Association, industry initiative, I would say, where we're addressing exactly these problems on what do I have to expect from a PCF verification? What is that? What are the differences? How can I prepare? So heavily recommend to have a read on that white paper of the Stadium Association, co-authored also by me. And yeah, to come back to your question, verification for large scale systems is interesting and also quite complicated from our point of view because it's not really how standards are written and are dictating how verification should be done. A current limitation is really what we are seeing on the standard side, that verification, similar to what LCA and PCF was in the past, really driven for one product. You do one study, write one report, and have a lot of time to do that. And of course, also a lot of resources to do that for just one product. And now everybody is talking about automation and scaling up. And then, of course, I can calculate not one PCS, I can calculate hundreds of thousands, hopefully in the same time. And then we run into the issue, okay, I can't use the same methodology for verifying one PCF result and 1,000 PCF results. But of course, we have to adhere to our standards. We have adhere to our ways of doing things. We have many also accreditations in that field as TÜV SÜD, meaning we have rules we have to play by. And all of this also, well, from our perspective, is interesting in the sense that we have to come up with new solutions how to handle that. And one possibility we came up with is a new service so-called software evaluation, sustainability software evaluation, where we check your LCA, program footprint, whatever software in a sense of how is the methodology and your processes working? How do you come to a result? And we then more go into the quality management, into what data did you use, and how do you structure your process as well, processes and ensure that the processes are of good quality, and you more or less can get to the same result every time. And we assess, evaluate all of that without looking at individual results anymore, because we can say, okay, if you do the process every time, it should result in the same quality output. Of course, we can't verify your individual output anymore because we still have this garbage in, garbage out problem, which we can't control. But we at least can say, okay, we give you some level of trust that what is happening, how you're calculating, what you are doing with your data is in general accurate according to standards. And thereby the result should also be at least some kind or a little bit more trustworthy than nothing, let's say that. And otherwise, well, of course, in a perfect world with unlimited resources, it's still the, let's say, the master class to have everything verified individually, but nobody has that resources, nobody has that money. And if I have a company with thousands of products, which are, well, with PCFs maybe calculating more than once a year, it's quite easy to calculate that there are not sufficient verifiers on Earth to the job. So this is also like quite a big limitation we are currently facing. And this is why there are so many, well, on one hand side, of course, softwares are popping up to help with calculating LCA and PCFs, but also industry initiatives. For example, also Catena X just released the PCF program certification guidance, let's call it, on how to do exactly that. So how to ensure that the process of how you come up with a PCF in your company is generally okay, without assessing the individual result every time. So yeah, in the end, I think this is quite an important step which we are currently taking.
Right, right. And I'm pretty sure that the processes will get more structured and standardized as more and more automation happens. We have to also be aware of the fact that automation is just starting to happen in the industry at that, and like we said, that large scale LCAs and PCF are just starting to begin. So as we see an increase, I'm pretty sure that expert verifiers will also have a more standard approach to how they are verifying these systems as well. And we will be sure to also add a link to the white paper that Jonas mentioned in the description that goes along with the podcast. All right, Jonas. So coming back, we did go a little bit into primary data. Coming back to that, there's a growing push, or primary data is being more talked about in the upcoming standards. I know of Together for Sustainability standard that is starting to talk of more primary data inclusion. So, companies are asking for more of this data from suppliers to use in their own calculations. But I always hear concerns about data quality, that if a supplier has sent me a data, how can I really trust it? So what steps can I as a company take who is getting a data from a supplier to ensure that the data that I have received is of high quality? What is it that, what's the quality assessment check here?
Mm-hmm. I think we have to go one step back first and have a quick look on how does it currently look like when a company receives primary data from a supplier. Because how I have experienced it, it's so diverse and it's so yeah, uncertain what you will receive. You will receive emails with just a number. You will receive 100 pages of report detailing down the value to the last detail. You will receive invitations to many different platforms which are helping you to share and to automate the sharing of product carbon footprint data. And I think, therefore, it's, as you said, the the trust in primary data and the quality can also be quite different. Can I trust an email which is just reporting one number after I annoyed the client 5 times and they just sent me something, so I keep my mouth shut? I don't know. So it's really about, okay, is primary data always better than secondary data? I would say yes, but under the precondition that I know where this data is coming from and that is somehow quality checked and not just made up to keep me somehow satisfied. Because we see a lot of companies don't have the capability or capacity to come up with their own primary data, and therefore it's quite hard to get reliable primary data from the supply chain. And secondary data, of course, it's also, on the one hand side, you can say secondary data is better if everybody would use the same secondary data, in the sense that you can get some kind of comparability between the different LCAs or PCFs. But then, do I really want comparability or do I want accuracy? And I only get accuracy with primary data and not just the same supply chain general industry average every time. And I think this is also where companies can really differentiate themselves, that they are the sustainability front runner, that they have the good quality data with hopefully also the lower environmental impact associated with it. But this could also be the case that I use secondary data on purpose because I know that the primary data I received is worse. Um, and there I can also again reference, for example, Catena X. They have a primary data share associated with their data model, which you have to report, that you can also, as a receiver of the data, not just make up your mind about, okay, is this, for example, PCF, CO2 equivalent value fine for me? But also, okay, how much primary data is associated with that? Is this a pure secondary data database study, or did they really put in the work to differentiate their product or to accurately model their product? And I think that's um, a big question, which is currently very, very hard to address. And of course, well, for me, it's easy to say, again, in a perfect world, every data set I receive should be verified. Uh, but yeah, again, we don't have enough resources in the world to achieve that. So for me, my yeah, best take on that would be that I would, as a supplier, try to do a hotspot analysis on what are my most important processes, suppliers, and so on, and then really dig down there, try to figure out how to get primary data from these processes, and at best have my suppliers or ask my suppliers to have their data verified to ensure that also their supply chain is modeled accurately, and that the data I receive is trustworthy. Because otherwise, we always have the problem of how can I trust the data, because no supplier will open their books for their clients and say, hey, this is how I came up with the data. This is my production process. This is my secret formula of how I make this product. And by the way, I have production costs of X. Yeah, so nobody will ever do that.
Right, right. Yeah. So I'm guessing that we have to build that credibility slowly and steadily with as a supplier, we have to build that credibility with our customers. And as customers, we have to keep engaging with our suppliers uh, to see how the data quality is eventually evolving and also help them in ways that can increase the data quality that we receive. We did get a little bit into comparability of sustainability of product data, Jonas. So here's a more debated, topic that always comes up is now product sustainability, including LCAs, PCFs, are are points of variables that companies are entering into competitive bids with, right? So the question is that is it acceptable to compare sustainability data because when the verification process happens, right, is there uniformity across all verifiers that the data that is verified all automatically becomes comparable in the way that it's verified? So what's the right answer here?
Mhm. I think it's always hard to compare LCA data. Um, I always have to think back when I taught LCA at the university. I always taught my students, um, I can give the same LCA data to 10 different consultants and I will get 10 different results. This is just because the the standards, the rules on how to do the LCA are so well vague and based on assumptions, and everybody might take another assumption a little bit different, and all are plausible and all are verifiable because you just don't know better. An LCA model is just a model; it's not reality. So you try, of course, to be as accurate as possible with the least amount of work necessary. So it's like a Pareto thing there as well. And well, you can also overcomplicate the model and it only gets worse and doesn't get better. So for me, comparing LCA is questionable at best. It can be done under the assumption that you, for example, have a LCA which is directly comparing products. So I have the same study using the same system boundary, using the same background data. Then, of course, comparison is fine. But in your case, where you have different companies reporting data to win, well, build competitive bids, there it's really about, okay, are they maybe a little bit greenwashing their data to have a financial benefit of it? And there it's really, really, really complicated to get an answer, because again, you will receive the value, the number, but there is limited background information to really assess, okay, where is this data coming from? Is this really comparable with the competitor's product? Are they maybe using a little bit different assumptions, a little bit different background data? And all of this is completely verifiable. So for us, we are, of course, looking at one PCF of one company and then at another's company. We are not really doing the direct comparison in the verification, but individually, each of these companies could come up with a verifiable or verified product carbon footprint. And I would still say they are not per se comparable, because they have just different baselining, different SIM boundaries and so on. And what is helpful here again is standardization. It really comes down to, okay, I cannot compare any LCA value, but I could, for example, for EPDs, they have these product category rules where they really dig down on, okay, if you calculate construction product, a very specific construction product, I don't know, and they have very specific rules on what assumptions am I allowed to take, what data am I allowed to use, what are my variables and parameters I can choose, and thereby they get at least some kind, or I would say the best comparability there is. But of course, still there's always a little bit of wiggle room. So I wouldn't, if I would have to judge these bids, let's say I'm the company receiving all these numbers and values, I wouldn't really go by the last digit and say, okay, this one is 0.001% better than the others in climate change. And therefore I have to choose this one. I think it's more on order of magnitude scale to really have a say there and well, make a comparison. But still, yeah, it really comes down to what standards are they using. And besides EPDs, of course, we have the European Product Environmental Footprint Method, who is also trying to do that. We have, as you've mentioned, TFS for the chemical sector, Catena X for automotive. So there are a lot of rules out there, but everybody has to use the same one to make it at least some kind comparable.
Right. Yeah. So frankly, this was going to be my next question to you about standards, and wonderful that it came around to that. Is that standards, as we see, individual industry standards are coming together to make data comparable for the same reason that sustainability now needs to be ingrained in business decision making, and that can only happen when we have enough of comparable data to really make that decision. I'm also seeing a lot of cross-industry collaboration happening as well here, and I noticed, Jonas, that you were also part of one of these collaborations between DFS and Catena X. So could you share a little bit more about your experience from there on how different industry standards are aligning so that not only products become comparable within their industry, but it is something that players across industries can also use to make decisions?
Mm-hmm. Interesting question. Yeah. Little bit of background. I participated in the work group where Catena X and Together for Sustainability joined forces to come up with a joint verification guideline, because in the past or in the earlier years, they have created their own guideline or standard, however you want to call it, on how to calculate the product carbon footprint for chemicals or for the automotive sector. And now they started individually to come up with ideas. Okay, how do I get trust in the data? And then they somehow figured out, why are we doing that twice? Let's join forces and combine our efforts and our previous work and our knowledge and experts to really come up with something which can be used together. Because the nice thing about verification is it's not sector specific. There's in the ISO world, there's one standard on how to do product carbon footprint verification, and it's applicable to every product carbon footprint because the verification process is the same. Of course, you need different experts. You can't send a concrete expert, like or a steel or whatever, to do a verification on an, I don't know, a highly complex electronics chip, because of course you have to know the background and the best practices of industries. But that's why they joined forces. And also coming back on your question, how they aligning and coming together in this space, is really because it's needed. That's the short answer. The harmonization is quite a big topic, and interoperability, of course, is also a key word, which always plays a role. And for verification, that's quite nice that they have come up with something which you can use for both initiatives. But all of these sector-specific things still has to be sector-specific or even product-specific. And we are again talking about this comparability, that everybody has to play to the same rules. And these rules are, of course, different depending on the product I'm assessing. So all of this collaboration is nice, but still there are so many different rules coming up because they have to get this level of detail. But in the end, then it's also the question of how can I, maybe in this example, Catinix and TFS, if I have a supply chain which is building on both things, starting with the TFS chemical, which is used in the automotive sector, how can I use this twice, or do I have to report two PCFs? Do I have to do double reporting, once for the Catena X, because somewhere in my supply chain, a little bit up, there is somebody, or down, depending on how you look at it, there is some automotive OEM or whatever who requires you to report your PCF according to the Catena X standard. But in the beginning of the supply chain, you have to report according to TFS. And then we have now the issue with the battery regulation of the European Union coming up, which has completely different rules. So then it also becomes an issue of how many different product carbon footprints do I have to calculate and report in order to satisfy my whole supply chain. And to be honest, it's quite many. Now we are just talking about industry-specific standards. Could be that somebody is just saying, okay, I want to have an ISO-conformant thing. And then we can talk about, okay, are these industry associations also by default ISO compliant or GHG protocol compliant or whatever? So there's, I think, a lot to do and a lot to figure out how to harmonize all of that. And also, last point about interoperability is the data model. It's not sufficient anymore to just share one PCF value, for example. It's really about all the underlying information which is needed, for example, also the primary data share, which we already talked about, to share that. And now we have TFS, Catinix, and the PACT Pathfinder framework all three different industry initiatives and associations coming up with their own data model, how to report and how to share PCF, and they are all different. And this is also something done by Estanium, the Estanium Association, where they try to harmonize the data model. And I wasn't part of that specific work group, but I heard that it's quite a lot of work to have a discussion on what is really needed and why different parts of the supply chain need different, well, parameters to be reported or not to be reported. And so there's quite a lot going on. I think it's a lot going on also in the sense of coming together, joining forces, but still due to the variety of products you can assess with product carbon footprinting, like everything can be assessed, right? Yeah, it's also a little bit much to say I have this one solution which fits all. Then it's again so quite generic, like the normal ISO standard, that one fits all solution doesn't enable comparability and enables, or not enables, but allows some kind of let's not call it greenwashing, but less conservative estimations and assumptions.
Right. Right. So I'm seeing that we started with ISO, which was more of an umbrella standard, then diverted into different standards, which were more akin to the industries that they were catering to. And now we are again going back to harmonizing all of them, but not going back in the sense of having an umbrella standard, which is open to interpretation and can get a lot of data quality issues, but in a sense that we still remain comparable without compromising on the quality of data. So, so we are coming around, but not exactly. We're coming around better. All right. Thank you for those insights, Jonas. It is very clear that the field of LCAs, PCFs, even their verification is evolving very quickly. And with the right practices, companies can navigate these challenges effectively because as you are learning, so is the world. So there is always support and there are always new learnings that are coming up that you can rely on. So before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners, Jonas?
Wow. I would say don't be afraid. Just just I think that was my first takeaway. Just start doing LCA, just start doing PCF, and learn on the go. There are a lot of very nice, very helpful people out there, and just ask questions, just do things and improve bit by bit. And I think this, will help hopefully a lot of people and also companies to finally get the grip on, most importantly, probably climate change topics and on their supply chain. And just, in the end, my big uh, thing I always say is I hope that at some point sustainability data gets treated like financial data. Like it's the same level of trustworthiness, the same level of how it's being handled. Just imagine there's controlling for environmental data, not just financial data in every company. That we might dream, but I think that's a little bit far in the future.
Yeah. Definitely far, but I am one of the more optimistic ones here that we are definitely working towards getting there. And and I completely echo what Jonas said. It is a it i- it is important, and it is also a long time dream of a lot of people working in the field that sustainability data comes you know, at par with the financial data. So with this, thank you so much for joining us today, Jonas, and it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast and learning from your expertise. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Sustainability Spotlight. Stay tuned for more insightful conversations about sustainability with leaders in the field. Until next time, stay informed and stay sustainable.